Yeah, good afternoon and welcome to this afternoon's session. Hope you've had a good break. I'm looking forward to this next presentation. It's a BREEAM award-winning retrofit project by Dan Tussell of Hayworth Tompkins, and it's at the Kingston School of Art in southwestern London. And I do know that campus well, and I'm ready to hand over to Dan, who's going to be presenting the overview, and we'll be back for Q&As after his presentation. So over to you, Dan.
Hi everyone, my name is Dan Tassell from Hayworth Tompkins Architects. Today I'm going to be talking about a deep retrofit we designed for Kingston University's Mill Street building. The project was completed at the end of 2019 and it went on to win BREEAM's Public Building of the Year award in 2021 in the post-construction category. And whilst achieving BREEAM Outstanding presented a number of challenges, perhaps the biggest challenge was that the building was occupied throughout the construction phase. And I'd describe the delivery of the project as being a bit like trying to replace the engine on a car whilst driving down the motorway at 70 miles an hour, something that requires a lot of commitments and guts. And so I'd like to take a moment just to thank Kingston University for being a brilliant client and setting a highly aspirational brief, the main contractor Overbrief for delivering the project on site, and Turner & Townsend and the rest of the project team for collaborating on what has turned out to be an exceptional sustainable retrofit. And as a practice, we've been exploring retrofit since we were formed 30 years ago, and we've built up considerable experience in that time. For us, this is a process of creative adaptation and reinvention, whether at the Royal College of Art, where we transformed a former bus garage into a painting school, the London Library, where a new reading room was slotted into an underutilised light well, or Battersea Arts Centre, where a new grand hall was formed in the burnt-out shell of the old. In each case, we're interested in working with the raw material of the existing, whilst adding new layers that enrich the original and allow the building to meet and also adapt to the needs and expectations of users for years to come. And this adaptability, of course, is a very important aspect of creating long-lasting, sustainable architecture. And the project's been delivered at a time when universities are facing up to the enormous challenge of decarbonisation. And if the last 10 years have been defined by bold new buildings, I'd like to think the next 10 years will be defined by the creative adaptation of existing estates. And the scale of this challenge is plain to see. Universities in this country have over 15,000 existing buildings spanning 28 million square metres, or the equivalent size of the city of Exeter. So over the next 10 years, many of these buildings will require at least some level of intervention, fabric upgrades, insulation, ventilation, new heat pumps and so on, if universities are to meet the ambitious targets that they are setting for themselves. And at the same time, students are demanding more from their institutions, making sustainability a key consideration when deciding where to study and pushing universities to put in place plans for action. The economic arguments for retrofit are equally as pressing, and failure to take action will mean existing buildings become stranded assets as the cost of carbon increases through economic forces and government policy. So it's within this wider context that we started to have conversations with Kingston University in 2016 about how we could use this project to demonstrate how retrofit can not only deliver practical benefits and energy savings, but can act as a catalyst for change. Kingston School of Art are recognised as one of the leading institutions for art and design teaching and research in the UK, and the project brief was to deliver around 10,000 square metres of studios and workshops for architecture, design and creative industries courses. The project was situated at the Knights Park campus, which occupies a fine position on the banks of the Hogsmill River in a largely residential area. It was purpose-built as an art school, with the original quad seen on the left, completed in the 1930s, and a further 3 buildings added between the 1950s and 1970s, including the Mill Street building on the right, which was completed in the 1970s. And this is how we found the building in 2015 when we were commissioned to do a master plan for the campus. And it wouldn't have won any beauty pageants, but it was a robust and functional building with a fantastic setting by the river. It also had a good solid bone structure with red brickwork and a concrete and steel frame, all of which were generally in good condition. However, environmental conditions in the building were very poor. It would overheat in the summer, it was cold in the winter, it had poor internal air quality and dust contamination in the workshops, and it had excessive energy use as well. The quality of the internal spaces were also compromised, with poor access to daylight, lots of dark internal corridors, low suspended ceilings, and a highly confusing layout. So why retrofit? At master plan stage, we explored a number of options, including the full demolition and rebuild of the building. However, by making the most of the existing structure, we were able to reutilize the significant embodied carbon already contained within the frame and within the masonry. Through careful phasing and sequencing, we're also able to avoid a full decant of the building. So this allowed us to keep vital workshop facilities in use throughout the works. Embodied carbon was obviously an important consideration, but it was by no means the only consideration. And achieving a BREEAM outstanding rating required close collaboration between the client, the design team, and the contractor to develop a really holistic approach that provided a full package of sustainability upgrades. So this included fabric improvements, window replacements, insulation, all delivered hand in hand with good ventilation. Waste during the construction was reused on site where possible, most notably by students in the workshops on site for their own projects. Adaptability to climate change was also a key driver. We're right by the river, so water runoff into the river was attenuated to reduce flooding. And meanwhile, because the building is in a flood zone, we used flood resistant materials on ground floor as well. So that when the building does flood, or if it floods, it can be easily refurbished. Biodiversity was enhanced as well through extensive areas of green roof, and there are a whole host of other measures implemented across the building. So just looking at some of those in a bit more detail, these diagrams show the northwest corner of the building. And what you can see on the left is the before and on the right is the after. What you'll notice is in the before, there was a large area of plant space up on the sort of third, fourth and fifth floors, which was sort of blocking access to daylight at that part of the building. So here we replaced redundant plant spaces with north-facing design studios, creating new areas of glazing, which greatly improved access and daylight to those spaces. We introduced large areas of green roofs and roof terraces. The roof terraces were linked to design studios, improving access to fresh air for students, whilst the 800 square meters or so of green roofs provide the biodiversity enhancements and the rainwater attenuation that I referred to before. Another significant change to the building was extending the lift and stair towers up to the top of the building. Previously, they terminated at the fourth floor, but we extended them up to provide access to the fifth floor. Previously, it was very hard to get onto the fifth floor and it was effectively not being put to use. So through these kind of measures, we were able to increase the efficiency of the building, providing about 20% additional usable floor area without actually extending the footprint or GIA significantly. So this sort of improved efficiency obviously delivers better value for the university and more usable floor space from their existing building stock. And this diagram shows the same corner of the building, just from a slightly different angle, just to give a slightly different view of how those different measures came together. And another key point to add is that the roof was fully replaced with a new highly insulated roof deck. And these images show the scale of the temporary roof required to keep the building dry and to keep it operational during the roof replacement works. And this aerial view shows the completed north-facing elevation with new factory slope glazing to the studios, the green roofs visible as well. Loading constraints on the existing structure meant we needed to vary the depth of the growing medium to support a range of plant species and to increase the number of species supported by the roof. We also integrated bat boxes. The river serves as a bat corridor, so it was important to provide habitats for the bats. And flipping around to the southern elevation, and here the main issue to address was overheating. We undertook thermal modelling, which identified the need for a degree of solar shading to reduce peak summer gains. On the 5th floor, we introduced new vertical clear-story glazing to replace slope glazing that was there before, and you can just about see the crank beam of the previous glazing line in the diagram on the right-hand side. And the glazing previously was set at a sort of 60-degree south-facing angle, so in the summer months, when the sun was at a similar angle, it really did act like a greenhouse. We used deep weathering steel fins and created deeper reveals to help reduce solar gain. And this is a close-up of these kind of sculptural pieces that we inserted into the windows on the south elevation. All windows also integrated glare control blinds, and the insulated walls were supported by a sort of mixed mode ventilation. So we have openable windows for summer ventilation, but also backed up by MVHR to ensure that we get the right level of air circulating all year round. And the rust orange metal was chosen for its tonal similarity to the building's aged bricks, and also for its raw sculptural quality. It was a favoured material of the likes of Anthony Caro and also the head of workshops, Richard Trupp, who was closely involved with the project throughout. And it's really a kind of an echo of the artistic production taking place inside the workshops. We're also keen that any new additions to the building should feel as though they could have been made in the workshops. And this is apparent in the facade elements, as well as things like ply furniture that we designed internally. In each case, they're defined by sort of functional detailing and craftsmanship. And the raw industrial qualities of the original building are complemented and amplified by these new additions to create a kind of riverside art factory for creative production. There was one part of the existing building where we did opt for demolition over retrofit. To the east, there was a 3-story porter's lodge, visible there in the image on the left. And this had the effect of blocking off access to the river from Mill Street. And with domestic floor heights that didn't line through with the existing building, it was felt demolition would be the best course of action. And what this really allowed is for a new public space to be created, a new entrance onto Mill Street, and to open up access to the river for local residents for the first time. And here we see how the new extension and entrance connect into the existing building in the left-hand image. And the public realm extends around that building and all the way along the riverfront, creating a new continuous route through the campus. And in multiple areas as well, we extended glazing of the existing building down to street level to act as a series of shop windows, opening up views into the workshops from the street. Benches were also integrated in the south-facing glazed portals, and this provided place to sit and kind of contemplate alongside the river. So, moving on to the building interior, a significant portion of the redesign was devoted to a much-needed untangling and rethinking about how space was used in the school. At the top of the building, there are 4 floors of adaptable design studios for graphic design, architecture, and product design. All of these have good access to daylight. The lower 2 floors, dedicated to open access workshops, with 3D production on ground floor and 2D image-based production on first floor. And these were linked by new stairs and lifts. So the ground and first floor plans are much deeper, and so we clustered dark spaces such as film studios, edit suites, and photo edit spaces in the middle of the plan. And this allowed spaces such as letterpress and printmaking to be positioned in areas with good daylight at the edges of the building. And these pictures show the large double height spaces at the centre of the building on first floor, which do have very little access to daylight, being converted into 4 film and photography studios. It's important to note this is actually above the wood workshop, so acoustic design was critical for the success of these spaces, and we used a box-in-box construction and a new floating slab, which provides separation from the workshops below. And this is one of the completed film studios in use, with pantographic lighting and a double height infinity cove as well. Moving on to the printmaking and big build spaces. Again, these are construction shots and completed shots here. So the letterpress workshop here on the corner of the building occupies the location of what was previously a sort of windowless plant space. And again, this is an example of trying to get spaces that really require daylight to the parts of the building that can offer it. All of the specialist workshops are designed to be openable out of hours for community programs. The picture at the bottom shows an open day where people can bring along their kids for printmaking workshops. And post-COVID, there are plans for courses in ceramics, woodworking, and other activities. The ground floor workshops include a range of processes, including woodwork, metalwork, stone carving, ceramics, metal forge, and foundry. So there are a whole host of technical coordination challenges, including specialist lighting, hot processes, local extract ventilation, compressed air lines, and so on. The floor had to be completely refurbished over the summer months, with some 200 machines moved off-site and a temporary workshop put in place for the summer. And it was all reinstated in time for inductions in October, which is a major logistical undertaking. On the upper floors, adaptability was key, and design studios were designed as flexible, repeatable modules to allow courses to expand and contract depending on demand. Each studio can split into smaller units with movable pinboards and storage units as well that can be wheeled in and out from one studio to the other. And visibility was also important, with views in and out of all the studios. This shows a typical studio on completion, and you can see there the flexible service infrastructure includes power modules hung from the ceiling, a sink off to the left in each studio, and ventilation that can support the space being subdivided. And each department has the scope to adapt their space to suit their specific needs. So this shows product design using the space both for design and for prototyping. And the design studios have become places of making as well as drawing. On level 4 and 5, there's a large double height space linking the architecture department. So we have big fold-out walls, which increase the amount of pin-up space. And this has started to feel like a kind of wonderful, lively town square. And it's used for crits, evening lectures, and large-scale fabrications and model making. So overall, the building is achieving around a 50% reduction in operational energy use, and the 2021 energy use is shown in orange and 2017 shown in blue. And this data is actually for the whole campus, of which the building makes up around roughly half of the floor area. So some quite significant reductions are visible. The university are undertaking a full post-occupancy evaluation, which is looking at energy performance on a more granular level, as well as undertaking building user surveys. And we look forward to seeing the full report when it's ready. Now, at the beginning, I talked about the project acting as a catalyst, and we've also gone on to design a master plan that puts the Mill Street building front and centre. So the new Mill Street entrance faces an expanded campus south of the Hogmill River. And this also includes ambitious plans to create new public spaces, enhance biodiversity, and also decarbonising the heating systems. The vision also includes a riverside public square linked to new buildings and repurposed industrial spaces. And the idea is to create a sustainable and thriving creative campus. But the project has also served as a catalyst for wider discussions around sustainability within the university. Through our ongoing relationship with Kingston, we've also delivered several smaller retrofit projects. We've given talks to staff and students on regenerative design and have contributed to a forward-thinking sustainability away day. And we've really enjoyed feeding into these wider discussions around the pathways to decarbonisation. And so in that respect, I think it's really helped to engage the imagination of the university. I think there's a great sense of engagement with the issues and an urgency to address them. And so we look forward to collaborating with Kingston as they continue on this journey. And that's it. Thank you. And I'm around for questions after the presentation. Thanks.
Dan, welcome, and thanks for that presentation. And what a fantastic project to have worked on. We were just chatting before we come on air. For everyone else, I know that site well. In a previous role, I've been out to visit the School of Art there and the Landscape School in Kingston, and it's a fantastic setting along the river there, with parks all round. So yeah, really interesting site that really I can see the enhancement that you've made there to embed sustainability through the design there. How did you find that in the project?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me as well. So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. We were commissioned originally to do the master plan for the site, and I think as I touched on in the presentation, we looked at a whole range of options for the site and how to address it. And this included whether to demolish large areas and start again, or whether to sort of work with what's there. And it's quite a unique setting for an art school. Certainly in the context of London, it's very peaceful. It's by the river. It encourages a very focused sort of way of working. And it, aside from the environmental performance of the buildings, they actually were very successful as creative spaces. So we made a decision with Kingston to kind of work with what was there and to try and enhance and improve on that really, and build out from that approach. So the existing buildings, there's a program to kind of improve those, and the master plan is part of that.
And it is encouraging to see people doing reuse and not demolishing full sites to really save as much embodied carbon as possible with the retrofit agenda. So that's really impressive. What else did you notice around the client's commitment to sustainability through the project? How involved were they? And obviously, education sector, obviously, next generation of students. Some term it the Greta Thunberg generation coming through now. Clearly, there's important values that exist across education and are being demanded by students and obviously academics to this sustainability agenda. How did you find that throughout the project management of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think Kingston have been absolutely brilliant on that front. They're very ambitious. They've got great people in their team. They've got biodiversity people. They've got sustainability people embedded, and very good energy manager as well. So it's very much part of their thinking. And I mean, what's interesting to observe is we started work on the project around 2015. It's now 2022, and just how much the conversation has shifted on even in that time. And we've taken part in sort of a way day with the university to look at their campuses and look ahead at how they might start to address not only decarbonisation but circularity, reuse of materials around their sites. You know, they come from a strong position in that because they manage so many buildings, they can think quite holistically and in a wide-reaching way about how they manage sustainability across the various sites they have. But obviously, they can't enact renewal of the entire campus in one hit. But what they're putting in place is a sort of decarbonisation strategy and plan and sustainability plan, which this project is one of the sort of early projects of that. But they're continuing to do some really great stuff.
And we obviously in the just the panel session before, we were talking about procurement and obviously the long lead-in times between design and planning approval and then delivery of construction projects. And particularly, we've had a pandemic in the middle of all of that as well, for good measure. And as you know, I'm there's chief executive of the Active Building Centre. So one thing that did strike me, and forgive me for asking the question, is that there wasn't sort of the renewable energy generation or solar. I didn't see those things featured, and I wondered, in terms of going forward, in terms of what were the considerations around heating, energy generation, and ultimately potential energy storage going forward, because this is becoming, I suppose, the issue of the moment now, and what's their kind of attitude to this in their decarbonisation plans going forward?
Yeah, I mean, certainly on a university level, they've got lots of plans. They have got renewable energy installed across parts of the campus, and there's plans to expand that. And they've also entered a sort of purchasing agreement for renewable energy as well. In the market to ensure the electricity that they're getting more in a more widespread way is from renewable sources as far as possible. On this particular project, I mean, we've obviously got large areas of flat roof, and we did, an obvious starting point was to put PVs on the roof. And at one point, we did have PVs and the green roofs running as an option.
Combination,
What we came against is the constraints of the existing structure meant we had to make a choice effectively between green roof or PVs, just in terms of loadings. And because of the flood the attenuation, the amount of rainwater we had to get off the roof, and the limited.
And it's very close to the waterway there. Absolutely, very close to the waterway for sure.
Yeah, and I guess we've had similar conversations on other projects. Roofs are, particularly in urban environments, there's a lot of things that are competing to be on those roofs. Be it amenity space, green roof, PVs, and we had to take a balanced view of what was going to be the most advantageous from a sort of holistic sustainability point of view for this particular site. And because the campus has, apart from the lovely Hogsmill River, it's a very kind of there's very little in the way of biodiversity because it's all very densely built. For the flooding and biodiversity reasons, we decided to prioritise maximising green roofs over PVs, but certainly it was explored, and there are plans to roll it out.
Good to know. No, it's important question for me to ask.
It's a good question, though.
And sort of as you were designing, what tools and standards did you find most useful to help you achieve some of those really good outcomes that you can see through this project?
Yeah, I mean, it's a sort of tried and tested methods, really. I mean, we did do a Brookle model, and we did some life cycle assessment as well to help make certain decisions. And in the end, we looked at, for one example, we looked at where we did have to demolish that small building on the end. We kind of did modelling on various structural approaches, and also on how we could reutilize the foundations. Apart from that, we used tried and tested methods looking at, say, the solar shading on the south, testing different projections of fins and trying to optimize
That's been one of the big issues that our team's found, actually, as you're doing retrofits or even designing for new builds. Once you start to have passive house type standards and better insulation in particular, then suddenly you do have this issue of overheating and the need for some level of solar shading in these buildings. So we've been struggling with some of those same challenges in the advisory work we've been doing.
And you've got to think
projects,
with the retrofit, you've got to be quite careful about what you're putting in there, and the building airtightness was improved, but we had to also think about moisture. We had to think about keeping good levels of ventilation as well, avoiding overheating. We actually introduced some adiabatic cooling into the ventilation system to help with some of the sort of more densely occupied spaces. So it's a whole sort of package of measures and a holistic view, really, that's needed. And I note that Letty are sort of working on guidance for the sort of retrofit side of things as well. And obviously when we started this, there wasn't really a manual for retrofit, whereas I think now the tools and resources available to help make informed decisions about how you insulate, how you ventilate, and how you generally deal with existing buildings in a considered way, I think has really moved on in the last 5 years. And that's only a good thing, I think.
Well, a massive thank you, Dan. We've kind of wrapped up there. We didn't get any of the audience questions in, but I think we've had a really useful discussion there. I mean, I will just say if anyone did have a burning question, I'm going to slightly run over and apologise to the organisers for that if anyone did have anything, but I'm not seeing that coming through. But a fantastic project. Well done on the award-winning scheme that you've got there, and look forward to seeing your future projects, Dan. So thanks so much for your time and your contribution to today.
Thank you, and thanks very much for having me. Speak soon.